test conditions, test cases, test procedures, and test suites. Before digging into the test process tasks, there are few terms that we are gonna use. Test conditions, test cases, and test procedures, and test suites. So let me explain those terms here first. Imagine in our software, which we're gonna call Expert Wave, we have a screen where we enter the age of the employee and hit OK. Don't ask me why we have a single field called age in a screen, but this is a customer request and we have to implement it. This part of the requirement could be read like this. Requirement 1A, the age of the employee shall be in the range from 20 to 50 whole numbers only. Now our job is to test this piece of requirement. What exactly do we mean by testing this piece of requirement? In simple words, it means we verify that this requirement has been implemented correctly in the software. So what would you like to test here? The way I think about it is that every word in the requirement document needs to be tested. I know this is extreme and doesn't actually happen like this, but this is just so you can get the idea. So in our example, we would like to test range 20 to 50, we would like also to test whole, and we would like to test numbers. What I have just listed are called test conditions. So what is a test condition? A test condition is an item or event of a component or system that could be verified by one or more test cases. For example, a function, transaction, feature, quality attribute, or structure element. So any tiny thing that needs to be tested is called a test condition. If I asked you to prioritize those test conditions, how would you do that? First, what do I mean by prioritize? Well, if you have almost no time to test, what would be the most important thing for you to test first? That you would feel that you have achieved something if they ask you to stop testing after it. Also, prioritization depends on what your customers most likely do, so you should test it first or more. Well, I think they look prioritized to me that way. Testing that the numbers are within range is the most important. Users would easily make a mistake to enter numbers out of range, so you want to make sure you can capture that. Then making sure that we would accept whole numbers. I think many users might try to enter real numbers instead of integer numbers. And last, we would need that we accept numbers and not characters. Well, this is the way I see it. You might see different prioritization. It's okay. It depends on the context of the software and understanding of your users. The next step after creating the test conditions is creating what we call the test cases. So what is a test case? A test case is a set of input values, preconditions, expected results, and post-conditions developed for a particular objective or test conditions. Again, let's continue with our example to see how to create test cases. Range 20 to 50. How would you test this? Give it a thought for a second. Correct. We should test below the range, below 20, which should be rejected by the software, inside the range, within 20 and 50, which should be accepted by the software, and above the range, above 50, which should be rejected also by the software. So we have created 3 test cases for a single test condition between 20 and 50. But those 3 test cases are called high-level test cases or logical test cases. Why they are called high-level? Because they don't indicate exact data, just logical information greater than or less than and so on. So do we have something called low-level test cases? Sure. If we say that our test cases are 10, which is below the range, 40 inside the range, 60 above the range. Low-level test cases are also called concrete test cases. If in the exam they didn't indicate whether the test case is high level or low level, then consider low-level test cases, which means that the test cases contain data. I will continue my example using data. The second test condition, whole, so whole numbers are valid, but non-whole numbers are not valid. So let's make sure our software does both. So let's try 40, which should be accepted by the software, and try 30.4, which should be rejected by the software. Last test condition, numbers. So let's try 40, which should be accepted by the software, and try XYZ as characters, which should be rejected by the software. Great. Did you notice something here? There could be more than one test case to satisfy a single test condition, and there could be a single test case in our example 40 that satisfies more than one test condition. Now, if you need to prioritize those test cases, how would you do that? I would say 40, 30.4, 10, 60, XYZ. It doesn't matter if you thought different. It could actually be different depending on the context of the software. Remember this testing principle? Testing is context dependent. But I have put 30.4 high because I thought many users might make the mistake of putting a decimal more than putting a lower or higher value than the range. So it varies. A proper test case usually comes with a predefined expected result, telling you what to expect when completing a test case. Similarly, it's common good practice to define the initial expected state when writing a test case. These preconditions are usually defined as separate property of the test case. When a condition isn't met, there is no point in testing the test case. The third step in testing is to write the steps that we need to perform to execute the test. Those steps are called a test procedure. This is beyond the scope of this syllabus, but I will talk about it to demonstrate how test cases or test procedures are used. So if you want actually to test the number 40, can you just type 40? No, you need to set up the software to be ready to run the test case. Therefore, to test 40, you would launch the ExpertWave application, select the New Employee menu item from the Employee menu, and New Employee dialog should be displayed. Check that the cursor blinking inside the age field, type in 40, and click OK button. Check the message "Thank you" is displayed. Do you really need to go into these detailed steps? Yes. Do you need to write in steps? Yes. So you might ask why? Because this test procedure can be executed by anyone other than you. So you want it to be as clear as possible for anyone to understand and execute it without any ambiguities. Notice a few points here in the test procedure. It tested that the cursor is blinking in the age field, even though it's not mentioned in the requirement document. The test procedure tested more than one test case. The existence of the menu item New Employee under the Employee menu, the cursor blinking, the number 40 is accepted in the age field. Another test procedure for the 30.4 test case might look like this. Launch the ExpertWave application, type Ctrl-N, the New Employee dialog should be displayed. Check that the cursor blinking inside the age field, type in 30.4 and press the Enter key. Check that the alert age should be whole numbers only is displayed. You can notice an extra point here. We changed the way we do things whenever we can. Triggering the New Employee menu item in the first test procedure, we tried to click on the menu, And in the second test procedure, we tried the shortcut. Same thing for triggering the OK button. Okay, so now you know about test procedures. But there is something to tell you. Between you and me, people in the industry don't usually use the term test procedure. They just refer to it as just a test case. So in your company, you won't find people differentiate between the logical idea of a test case and the formal test case. Saying that, we still use the term test procedure in our ISTQB Foundation syllabus. The last term we need to learn is test suite, which should make sense to you once you get it. With a growing amount of test cases and test procedures, the need for categorizing them increases as well, for better accessibility. In the process of planning and running tests, keeping track of hundreds of test procedures becomes a hard job. Thinking in terms of we need to run a performance test tomorrow, or we need to make sure the build is in a good shape now, or is the login module stable or not, forces you to know the purpose and domain of each test procedure. A test suite allows you to categorize test procedures in such a way that they match your planning and analysis needs. Do you run functional and performance tests? Create two suites and label them accordingly. You can create test suites as many as you need. One for functional tests, one for performance test, one for recovery test, one for lengthy test procedures that may need to run through the night, one for quick smoke test procedures to make sure the build is good, and so on. A test procedure can be added to multiple test suites and test plans. Test suites are created, which in turn can have any number of tests. Test suites are created based on the cycle or based on the scope. It can contain any type of tests. So test suites are created based on the cycle or based on the scope. So I hope you get a better idea now about test conditions, test cases, test procedures, and test suites. Let's go back to our syllabus.